She became CEO on Monday. By Friday, she handed me divorce papers across her new desk and told me I was just the money guy. Now, what Sarah didn't know was that 3 years ago, when our company almost went bankrupt, I had made a secret deal with an investor, a deal that would only activate if she ever tried to push me out. And her divorce papers? They just activated it. In 48 hours, she would learn that being CEO doesn't mean you actually own the company. Before we continue with David's story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible real-life stories. I'm curious, are you watching from New York, Chicago, Miami, or maybe somewhere in Texas? Let me know in the comments below. Now, let's dive into how David's carefully planned strategy began to unfold. David Martinez adjusted his tie as he walked through the shiny hallway of Bright Tech Solutions in downtown Seattle. At 38 years old, he had helped build this company from absolutely nothing. He still remembered when he and his wife Sarah worked in their garage, eating cheap pizza and dreaming big dreams. Now, 10 years later, they had a real office building with 200 employees and were worth $40 million. David knocked on the big office door, carrying 2 coffee cups like he did every morning. This was their special tradition, bringing Sarah her favorite caramel latte before work started. Sarah Martinez sat behind the fancy wooden desk in her new corner office. She had just been promoted to CEO last Monday, and David was so proud of her. At 36, Sarah was smart, beautiful, and had worked incredibly hard. She wore a sharp black suit, and her long brown hair was pulled back professionally. But something felt wrong this morning. Usually, Sarah would smile when David brought her coffee. Usually, she would say, "Good morning, honey," and tell him about her plans for the day. But today, she didn't even look up from her computer. Her fingers typed fast on the keyboard, and her face looked cold, like she was angry about something. "Good morning," David said cheerfully, placing her coffee on the desk. "I got extra caramel, just how you like it." Sarah didn't respond. She just kept typing. The silence felt uncomfortable, like when you know something bad is about to happen but you don't know what. David had been married to Sarah for 10 years. He knew all her moods, when she was happy, when she was stressed, when she was tired. But this was different. This felt scary. "Sarah?" David said softly. "Is everything okay? Did something happen?" Finally, Sarah stopped typing. She closed her laptop with a loud snap that made David jump a little. Then she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a big yellow envelope. She slid it across the desk toward David without saying a word. David's hand started shaking as he picked up the envelope. He saw the return address printed on the front. Thompson and Associates Divorce Attorneys. His heart dropped into his stomach. "Divorce papers?" he whispered, barely able to speak. "Sarah, what's going on? Last week you were talking about taking a vacation to celebrate your promotion. We were planning to renew our wedding vows next month, remember?" Sarah leaned back in her expensive leather chair and crossed her arms. Her brown eyes looked at David like he was a stranger, or worse, like he was someone she didn't like anymore. "Things changed, David," she said in a cold voice. "I've been thinking about this for months. Becoming CEO made me realize something important. I don't need you anymore. You're just the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer. That means you handle the money and the boring paperwork. But I'm the one who really runs this company now. I'm the boss. I'm in charge of everything." Each word felt like a knife cutting into David's heart. The coffee cup slipped out of his hand and crashed onto the floor, spilling hot brown liquid everywhere. But David didn't even notice. He just stared at the woman he had loved for 10 years, the woman he had helped when she cried about her mom being sick, the woman he had danced with at their wedding, the woman he thought would be his partner forever. "There's more," Sarah continued, her voice as cold as ice. "You know Marcus Blake from our marketing department? Well, Marcus and I have been working very closely together on some big projects. He's really smart and creative, and he understands my vision for the future. So I'm promoting him to Chief Operating Officer. That's the second highest position in the company, right under me. Marcus and I are going to take Bright Tech to the next level. We're going to make this company bigger and better than you ever could. The way Sarah said, working very closely together, made David's stomach hurt. Marcus Blake was the smooth-talking marketing guy who always wore expensive suits and told jokes that made everyone laugh. David had noticed that Sarah seemed to smile a lot during Marcus's presentations lately. He had seen them having long meetings together after work. But David had trusted his wife. He never thought. 10 years, Sarah, David said quietly, trying not to cry. 10 years of building this company together. Remember when we got our very first customer? You told me that night that you couldn't imagine succeeding without me. You called me your rock, your steady, reliable partner who kept everything organized while you chased the big dreams. Sarah stood up and walked to the big window that overlooked the Seattle skyline. Tall buildings stretched out in every direction, and the morning sun made everything look golden and beautiful. That version of me was naive and foolish, Sarah said, looking out at the city like a queen surveying her kingdom. That girl believed in fairy tales about partners who stay together forever. But business isn't a fairy tale, David. Business requires smart decisions. And a smart decision is to work with people who match my ambition, people who want to grow and change, not anchors who drag me down with their outdated loyalty and boring caution. David felt something shift inside his chest. Yes, his heart was broken. Yes, he felt betrayed and hurt. But underneath all that pain, something else was growing, something sharp and focused. Sarah had made a huge mistake. She thought David was just a boring number cruncher who would roll over and accept defeat. But what Sarah didn't know, what she had absolutely no idea about, was what David had done 3 years ago to protect their company. 3 years ago, Bright Tech had almost died. A terrible economic crisis had caused all their customers to cancel their contracts. They were losing money so fast that bankruptcy seemed certain. While other companies were closing their doors and firing all their employees, David had worked day and night to find a solution. He had called every bank and every investor he could find. But everyone said no. Nobody wanted to invest in a dying company. That's when Alexander Cross had appeared, a mysterious, wealthy investor who offered to save Bright Tech with a huge loan of $15 million. But Mr. Cross had unusual requirements. He wanted special legal protections written into the contract, protections that would keep the company safe if anything bad ever happened to the leadership. David had worked with Mr. Cross's lawyers to create something called a trust fund structure. It was complicated and involved a lot of legal paperwork. Sarah had been so stressed about keeping the company running that she trusted David to handle all the financial and legal details. She had signed the papers without reading every single page. After all, she trusted her husband completely back then. That trust fund structure had created a secret safety net, a hidden protection that Sarah knew nothing about. And her actions today had just triggered it. David paused at the office doorway, looking back at Sarah one last time. She stood by the window, silhouetted against the bright morning light, looking confident and powerful, like someone who had just won a great victory. "You're right about one thing," David said softly. "You really don't understand what success requires at this level. But don't worry, Sarah. You're about to get an education you'll never forget." He closed the door gently behind him and walked down the hallway past all the conference rooms where he had negotiated deals that saved the company. Past the cubicles of employees who respected him and trusted his judgment. David felt his sadness slowly transforming into something else, cold, calculated determination. Sarah thought she had won. She thought she held all the power now. But she was about to discover that she had been playing a completely different game than she realized. And in 48 hours, her whole world was going to flip upside down. The next morning, David arrived at work early and found the office in chaos. Security guards were walking 3 senior managers out of the building, carrying boxes of their personal belongings. These were people David had worked with for years, good people who were excellent at their jobs. There was Jennifer Park from accounting, who had helped David reorganize the company's debts during the financial crisis. There was Tom Wilson from operations, who had figured out how to make their production more efficient and save money. And there was Lisa Chen from Human Resources, who had helped build a workplace where people actually enjoyed coming to work. Sarah moved through the office like a general taking over enemy territory. Her high heels clicked loudly on the marble floor as she held meeting after meeting with department heads. By lunchtime, she had completely reorganized the company. Marcus Blake, her new boyfriend, was now chief operating officer with authority over half the company. Starting immediately, Sarah announced in a mandatory all-staff meeting, any financial decisions over $25,000 must be approved by both the CEO and the COO. Her eyes found David in the crowd of employees, and she smiled slightly, a smile that said, "I'm in charge now, and you're not." The message was crystal clear. David's power as CFO had been cut in half. He used to make important financial decisions on his own. Now he would need permission from Sarah and Marcus for almost everything. She was systematically dismantling his authority while building up her own power base. David sat quietly during the meeting, nodding professionally and taking notes like these changes were just normal business improvements. But inside his head, his analytical mind was cataloging every move Sarah made, every alliance she was building. She was preparing a corporate landscape where David's presence would eventually be unnecessary and easily eliminated. The afternoon brought more casualties. Robert Hayes from legal, who had been with the company for 7 years. Amy Rodriguez from strategic planning, who had helped develop their 5-year growth plan. Each departure was announced as organizational restructuring and strategic realignment. But the pattern was obvious to anyone paying attention. Sarah was firing everyone who respected David's leadership, or who might question her new direction. During his lunch break, David's mind drifted back 3 years to Brightekka's darkest hour. Back then, the economy had crashed hard. A pandemic had shut down businesses all over the world. Brightekka's customers started canceling contracts overnight. Within 3 months, they went from making good money to losing it rapidly. Banks would loan them money because they thought Brightek would go bankrupt. Regular investors had all fled the market in panic. That's when Alexander Cross had appeared like a guardian angel. Mr. Cross was a private investor, meaning he used his own personal fortune to invest in companies. He was 60 years old, with silver-gray hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to see right through people. He dressed in perfectly tailored suits and spoke with quiet confidence. Mr. Cross had offered exactly what Brightek needed, $15 million to survive the crisis and rebuild. But his conditions were unusual. He wanted complex legal structures and confidentiality agreements, secret documents that even Sarah didn't fully understand. She had been so focused on keeping the company alive and the employees paid that she trusted David's expertise with the financial details. She had signed the documents after a brief review, never questioning the intricate paperwork that saved their company. Those documents had created a hidden ownership structure that Sarah knew nothing about. And now, her betrayal was about to activate protections that had been sleeping for 3 years, just waiting for a moment exactly like this. After work that evening, David drove to the downtown offices of Williams & Partners, a law firm that specialized in complicated corporate disputes rather than emotional divorce cases. He needed lawyers who understood business contracts, shareholder agreements, and corporate governance, not lawyers who would focus on hurt feelings and broken hearts. Margaret Williams was a sharp-eyed attorney in her early 50s with short gray hair and glasses that made her look like a strict but fair school principal. She reviewed David's situation with professional detachment that David found oddly comforting. "Your wife has made several interesting decisions," Margaret observed, studying the organizational changes Sarah had implemented at Brightek. She promoted her romantic partner to a brand new executive position that didn't exist before. She restructured approval processes specifically to limit your authority. And she fired senior staff members who supported your leadership. These actions could be interpreted as violations of her fiduciary duty. Fiduciary duty is a fancy legal term that means when you're in charge of a company, you have a responsibility to do what's best for the company and all its owners, not just what's best for yourself personally. There's something else. David said, pulling a thick folder from his briefcase. The investor agreements from our financial restructuring 3 years ago contain certain provisions that might be relevant. I'd like you to review them carefully, especially the sections dealing with management changes and ownership structure. Margaret's eyebrows rose higher and higher as she read through the documents. Her expression shifted from professional interest to genuine surprise, like someone who just discovered a hidden treasure map. These are remarkably comprehensive and sophisticated, Margaret said slowly. Who drafted these agreements? This is some of the most thorough protective language I've seen in years. I worked with Alexander Cross's legal team, David replied. Mr. Cross was very particular about protecting his investment. He wanted safeguards in place for worst-case scenarios. Margaret continued reading, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. After about 20 minutes, she looked up at David with something like admiration in her eyes. Mr. Martinez, if what I'm reading here is accurate, your wife doesn't actually have the authority she thinks she has. This trust fund structure is brilliant. It creates a protective shield around the company's core ownership that she apparently never understood. David felt a surge of vindication. For 3 years, those documents had sat quietly in a filing cabinet, insurance he hoped he'd never need to use. But Sarah's betrayal had forced his hand. Meanwhile, across town, Sarah and Marcus were working late at the Bright Tech offices, finalizing details of their secret plan. They had been in discussions with Megacorp Industries, a huge competitor that wanted to buy Bright Tech for $50 million. If the sale went through, Sarah would personally make about $20 million and could walk away rich, powerful, and free to start a new life with Marcus. What Sarah didn't realize was that David had friends throughout the Seattle business community. People who owed him favors, people who respected his integrity and professional expertise. One of those friends worked at Megacorp and had quietly informed David about the acquisition discussions. Sarah was planning to announce the sale at tomorrow's board meeting. She believed she had the authority as CEO to approve the transaction independently. She was counting on David being too emotionally devastated to interfere with her plans. But David wasn't devastated anymore. He was focused, determined, and armed with information Sarah didn't know existed. That evening, David returned home to the house he and Sarah had bought together 5 years ago. It was a beautiful modern home in a nice Seattle suburb, with a big backyard and a view of the mountains. Every room held memories of their marriage, photos from their wedding, souvenirs from vacations they'd taken together, books they'd read and discussed over coffee on Sunday mornings. Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner, which surprised David. She had put on a flowing blue dress and was cooking pasta with unusual care and attention. She moved gracefully around the kitchen, and for a moment, David could almost pretend everything was normal, that they were still a happy couple sharing an ordinary evening. "How was your day?" Sarah asked sweetly, as if she hadn't destroyed their marriage that very morning. She was pretending, playing a role, acting like a loving wife while planning to take everything from him. "Productive," David replied carefully, accepting the glass of wine she offered. "I've been thinking about our future, about Bright Tech's direction. Tomorrow's board meeting should be very interesting, don't you think?" Sarah's smile flickered slightly, like a candle in a breeze. "Oh, you're planning to attend? I thought you might prefer to skip it, given our personal situation. We're going to discuss some major strategic initiatives that might be emotionally difficult for you to hear." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," David said calmly, maintaining eye contact. After all, major strategic initiatives affect all shareholders. Some decisions are too important to delegate, even to the most capable CEO. The kitchen fell silent except for the bubbling of pasta water on the stove. Sarah studied David's face carefully, searching for signs of the broken, defeated man she expected to find. Instead, she saw someone who seemed strangely calm, almost amused by the situation. This clearly unsettled her. "David, I hope you understand that my decisions, both personal and professional, are based on what's best for everyone involved," Sarah said carefully. "Sometimes growth requires painful changes, but the end result justifies the temporary discomfort." "Absolutely," David agreed, raising his wine glass in a mock toast. Growth does require change. And sometimes the people who think they're in control discover they've been playing a completely different game than they imagine. Sarah's eyes narrowed suspiciously. For the first time since announcing the divorce, she seemed uncertain, like someone who just realized their opponent might be smarter than they initially thought. The boardroom at Bright Tech Solutions had never felt more tense. David arrived early, carrying a briefcase containing documents that would completely reshape the company's power structure. Board members gradually filed in, 5 external directors plus Alexander Cross, whose presence surprised several attendees. Sarah entered with Marcus, both radiating the confidence of people who believed they controlled the agenda completely. Sarah wore a sharp navy suit that projected executive authority. Marcus carried himself with the swagger of someone who thought his new position was secure and permanent. Neither of them noticed the subtle tension in the room, or how Mr. Cross watched them with the patient, predatory focus of a cat watching mice. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah said brightly, taking her seat at the head of the table. "Today we're going to discuss an exciting opportunity that will transform Bright Tech's future. Megacorp Industries has presented an acquisition offer that represents exceptional value for all shareholders." Marcus distributed presentation materials outlining the $50 million deal. "The terms are extremely favorable," he explained smoothly, using his practiced marketing voice. "Megacorp is offering a 25% premium over our current market value, with guaranteed employment for key personnel and substantial growth opportunities. This acquisition would position Bright Tech for expansion we couldn't achieve on our own." David remained silent during the presentation, occasionally taking notes while studying the board members' faces. Several looked impressed by the financial projections. But Mr. Cross maintained his amused detachment, like someone watching actors perform a play whose ending he already knew. When Marcus finished his presentation, David calmly opened his briefcase. "Before we proceed with any vote," David said quietly, "the board should review some critical information about our ownership structure that directly impacts this decision." He distributed copies of the trust fund documentation to everyone at the table. Surprised expressions rippled around the room like waves on a pond. "What is this?" demanded Robert Chin, one of the external directors. His confusion was evident as he scanned legal documents outlining financial arrangements he'd never seen before. "These ownership percentages don't match our corporate records." Sarah's confident expression faltered as she examined the paperwork. "David, what are you doing?" Her voice carried an edge of panic. "This isn't the time for financial technicalities. We're discussing a major strategic decision that requires immediate board action." "Actually, this is exactly the right time," David replied calmly. 3 years ago, during our financial crisis, I worked with Mr. Cross to establish a trust fund structure that secured his investment capital. Through this arrangement, I control 51% of Bright Tech Solutions, making me the majority shareholder with ultimate decision-making authority over all major corporate decisions. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as board members absorbed the implications. Sarah's face drained of all color as she realized the magnitude of her miscalculation. Marcus looked completely confused, unprepared for legal complexities that threatened to derail their entire plan. "That's impossible," Sarah said, her voice rising with desperation. "I'm the CEO. I have the authority to make strategic decisions for this company. These documents must be forgeries or some kind of manipulation." She turned to Alexander Cross, suddenly understanding why he was present. "You're behind this somehow, aren't you? This is some scheme you cooked up with David." Mr. Cross smiled gently, like a kind grandfather explaining something to a confused child. "I'm simply an investor protecting my interests, Ms. Martinez. The trust fund structure was designed specifically to prevent unauthorized sales or management changes that could damage shareholder value. Your recent actions, promoting your romantic partner without proper board approval, eliminating qualified executives for personal reasons, and negotiating secret deals with our biggest competitor, have triggered the protective clauses we implemented 3 years ago. Furthermore," David continued, producing additional documents, "you've violated your fiduciary duties as CEO through unauthorized expenditures, conflicts of interest, and premature disclosure of confidential information to potential acquirers. I have documentation of expensive personal dinners charged to the company credit card, luxury hotel stays that exceeded corporate guidelines, and consulting contracts awarded to companies connected to Marcus without proper board approval. Margaret Williams, David's attorney, had quietly entered the room and now stood near the door. Additionally, Ms. Martinez, Margaret said professionally, your promotion of Mr. Blake to Chief Operating Officer was unauthorized and invalid because it was implemented without proper shareholder approval. As such, Mr. Blake has no legal standing to participate in this board meeting. Marcus attempted to object. This is clearly a personal vendetta disguised as corporate governance. Sarah has led this company to unprecedented success, and these accusations are. Mr. Blake, Margaret interrupted firmly. You're not a board member and have no standing to participate in these proceedings. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Sarah stood abruptly, her composure finally cracking completely. This is insane. I built this company alongside David. I've sacrificed everything for Bright Tech's success. You can't strip away my position because of personal grievances and technical paperwork. The paperwork isn't technical, replied board member Linda Washington, a respected business professor who had joined Bright Tech's board 2 years ago. It's legally binding and properly executed. Mr. Martinez clearly has majority control, which means you've been operating under false assumptions about your authority, Ms. Martinez. Mr. Cross called for a vote. All in favor of removing Sarah Martinez as CEO and rejecting the Megacorp acquisition, please raise your hands. 4 hands went up immediately. 1 director abstained, citing a potential conflict of interest. Mr. Cross voted last, his hand rising with visible satisfaction. The motion passes, announced Robert Chin solemnly. Sarah Martinez is hereby removed from her position as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. David Martinez will assume the role of interim CEO pending organizational restructuring. Sarah stared around the table in complete shock, unable to process the total reversal of her fortunes. Just minutes earlier, she had been presenting a deal that would make her rich and powerful. Now she faced professional humiliation and personal devastation. This isn't over, Sarah said, her voice trembling with rage and disbelief. I'll contest this in court. I'll fight every single decision you've made today. You may think you've won, but security will escort you from the building, David said quietly, pressing a button that summoned guards who had been waiting outside. Your corporate access has been revoked, and your personal items will be shipped to your attorney's office. As security guards appeared at the boardroom entrance, Sarah looked at David with an expression mixing hatred, betrayal, and dawning understanding. She finally comprehended the depth of his strategic planning, the patience he had demonstrated, and the completeness of her defeat. Security, please escort Ms. Martinez and Mr. Blake from the building, David said with calm finality. And Marcus, you're fired too. The security escort from Bright Tech's headquarters was a humiliation Sarah had never imagined possible. Employees watched through glass office walls as guards accompanied her to the parking garage, her belongings hastily packed into cardboard boxes. Whispers followed her down the hallways, former subordinates processing the shocking reversal that had transformed their powerful CEO into a terminated employee within hours. Marcus remained silent during the elevator ride down to the parking garage. His earlier swagger had completely evaporated. The confident marketing executive who had charmed clients and impressed investors now looked like someone who had just realized he had bet everything on a losing horse. This is temporary, Sarah said as they reached their cars, though her voice lacked conviction. David's playing games with legal technicalities, but I built that company. The board will come to their senses eventually. Marcus unlocked his BMW and threw his belongings into the back seat with unnecessary force. Sarah, I need to be honest with you. This relationship was fun while it lasted, but I can't afford to be associated with this situation anymore. My career has to be my priority now. His tone was coldly businesslike, completely devoid of the passion that had driven their affair. Are you serious? Sarah stared in disbelief. After everything we planned together? After all the promises you made about leaving your wife and building a future with me? Be realistic, Marcus replied, avoiding eye contact. You're unemployed and about to go through an expensive divorce. I'm 34 years old with a mortgage and student loans. I can't afford to carry dead weight, especially someone with serious legal complications. He started his engine and drove away without another word, leaving Sarah standing alone in the parking garage, surrounded by boxes containing the remnants of her shattered career. Meanwhile, David conducted his first meeting as interim CEO, addressing the leadership team Sarah had restructured just days earlier. The conference room felt different now, calmer, more focused, without the underlying tension that had characterized recent sessions under Sarah's volatile leadership. Our immediate priority is stabilizing operations and reassuring our clients about continuity, David explained, distributing new organizational charts that restored the previous structure. I'm reinstating Jennifer Park as head of accounting. Tom Wilson will return as operations director. Lisa Chin will resume her HR responsibilities. And we're canceling all negotiations with Megacorp Industries, effective immediately. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Employees who had been terminated for political reasons were eager to return. Major clients who had expressed concerns about recent management instability were relieved about the leadership transition. By the end of the day, Brighttech's stock price had actually increased, reflecting investor confidence in the new direction. Sarah spent the afternoon calling divorce attorneys, desperately seeking legal representation for both her employment situation and the impending divorce. The first 4 lawyers she contacted declined her case after reviewing the trust fund documentation and prenuptial agreement. Mrs. Martinez, explained attorney Patricia Hayes during a phone consultation, your husband's ownership structure is legally sound and properly documented. You signed these agreements 3 years ago, which makes challenging them extremely difficult. Additionally, your recent actions as CEO appear to violate several fiduciary duties, which complicates any potential wrongful termination claims you might consider filing. The prenuptial agreement was equally devastating. During happier times, back when Sarah believed their marriage would last forever, she had signed an agreement that limited her claims to marital property. The document even included morality clauses that voided spousal support in cases of adultery, and David had accumulated substantial evidence of her relationship with Marcus through hotel receipts, text messages, and witness testimony. 3 weeks after the dramatic board meeting, the divorce proceedings moved swiftly through the King County court system. David's attorney, Margaret Williams, had assembled an airtight case based on the prenuptial agreement Sarah had willingly signed during their engagement. Your Honor, Margaret addressed the family court judge, my client has provided substantial evidence of Mrs. Martinez's extramarital relationship with company employee Marcus Blake, including hotel receipts, travel records, text message exchanges, and testimony from multiple corporate witnesses. Additionally, her violations of fiduciary duty as CEO constitute a breach of the prenuptial agreement's conduct provisions. Sarah sat beside her court-appointed attorney, a competent but overworked public defender who was no match for the high-powered legal team David had assembled. Every argument her lawyer raised was systematically dismantled with documentation proving David had been preparing for this possibility for years. The defendant will receive the settlement amount specified in the prenuptial agreement, the judge announced after a brief deliberation. However, given the documented violations of the agreement's moral conduct clauses, spousal support is hereby denied. The divorce is granted with immediate effect. Sarah walked out of the courthouse with essentially nothing. The settlement gave her about $200,000, barely enough to buy a small condo and support herself for a year while she looked for work. Everything else, the house, the cars, the investment accounts, remained with David according to the prenuptial agreement's terms. Over the following months, David worked tirelessly to rebuild the company Sarah's actions had nearly destroyed. He met personally with key investors and major clients, reassuring them about Brighttech's stability and long-term vision. The attempted sale to Megacorp had spooked several important accounts, but David's transparent communication style and strategic focus gradually restored confidence. The attempted sale was unauthorized and has been permanently terminated, David explained during video conferences with BrightTech's largest clients. We're committed to maintaining our independence and continuing the innovative partnerships that have defined our success. Our recent leadership changes ensure BrightTech will remain focused on excellent client service rather than corporate maneuvering and personal agendas. 6 months after Sarah's departure, BrightTech had not only recovered but was actually performing better than before. Employee morale surveys showed dramatic improvements. Turnover rates dropped to industry lows. Innovation metrics reached all-time highs. The toxic competitive atmosphere Sarah had created during her final months was replaced with collaborative teamwork. David also hired a new organizational consultant named Emma Chun to help oversee the cultural transformation. Emma was 32 years old, brilliant at understanding how organizations work, and brought an infectious optimism that helped heal wounds from the previous leadership conflicts. Quarterly reports show consistent growth across all divisions, Emma announced during a Monday morning leadership meeting. But more importantly, employee engagement scores indicate that people actually enjoy coming to work again. That's the real measure of organizational health. Her genuine smile reflected the positive energy she brought to the company. David found himself looking forward to these meetings, not just for the business updates, but for Emma's presence. Over several months, their professional collaboration evolved into a friendship based on mutual respect and shared values. It was completely different from the competitive, power-driven dynamic he had experienced with Sarah. Meanwhile, Sarah was rebuilding her career from scratch at a small technology startup called Innovate Tech Solutions. The company specialized in helping small businesses implement digital solutions, meaningful work, but far removed from the high-stakes corporate world she had once dominated. It's humbling work, Sarah confided to her therapist during a session. But it's teaching me leadership lessons I never understood before. I spent so many years obsessively climbing corporate hierarchies that I forgot the important part of business is actually helping people succeed and creating value, not just accumulating power and titles. Therapy had helped Sarah understand how her ambition had twisted into something unhealthy, a need to dominate and control rather than collaborate and build. She was slowly learning to appreciate the simple satisfaction of doing good work without constantly comparing herself to others or scheming for advancement. 1 year after the dramatic board meeting, BrightTech Solutions had transformed into a model of corporate excellence. The company culture David had rebuilt emphasized collaboration over competition, ethical leadership over ruthless ambition, and sustainable growth over short-term profits. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. The company had won several awards for workplace culture and innovation. Revenue had increased by 30%, and they had just secured their largest contract ever, a 5-year technology partnership with a Fortune 500 company that specifically cited confidence in BrightTech as stable, ethical leadership as a key factor in their decision. David's relationship with Emma Chin had gradually evolved from professional collaboration into something deeper. They had been carefully navigating the transition from colleagues to something more personal, both cautious about mixing business and romance given David's painful history. One evening, as they worked late on strategic planning in David's office, their conversation shifted to personal topics. "You know," Emma said softly, "I've really enjoyed getting to know you beyond the boardroom dynamics. You're not what I expected when I first took this consulting contract. You're kind, thoughtful, and genuinely care about people, not just profits and power." Her honesty was refreshing, completely free from the manipulation and hidden agendas that had poisoned David's marriage to Sarah. "I feel the same way," David replied honestly. "For the first time since my divorce, I'm optimistic about personal relationships again. You've helped me remember that not everyone views relationships as competitions to win or lose." Their first kiss happened naturally that evening, not driven by desperate passion or corporate ambition, but by something deeper and more sustainable: genuine trust, mutual respect, and authentic affection built on solid foundations rather than power dynamics. As seasons changed and BrightTech continued its remarkable growth trajectory, David realized he had not only survived his crisis, but had emerged stronger, wiser, and happier. The company was more successful than ever. His relationship with Emma was developing with healthy patience. And he had learned invaluable lessons about the difference between love and control, between partnership and possession. Sarah, too, had found a kind of peace. Though she would never again reach the corporate heights she had once occupied, she had discovered something arguably more valuable: contentment with meaningful work, honest relationships, and a clearer understanding of what truly mattered in life. One afternoon, she sent David a text message, the first direct communication they'd had in nearly a year. "I know you'll probably never forgive me, and I understand why. But I need you to know that I'm genuinely sorry for everything I did. I was so blinded by ambition and the pursuit of power that I destroyed the best thing in my life. I've started a small consulting practice helping entrepreneurs, and I'm learning to measure success by the positive impact I have on others rather than titles and money. I won't bother you again, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry and that I hope you found happiness." David read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt with apologies or explanations. Sarah's choices had consequences that extended far beyond their personal relationship. They had affected hundreds of employees, millions in shareholder value, and the trust of countless business partners. Her regret was genuine but irrelevant to the damage already done. Epilogue: Lessons learned. 2 years after Sarah's removal as CEO, David stood in his office on a Friday evening, watching the Seattle sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Bright Tech was now valued at over $60 million, more than what Sarah had tried to sell it for to Megacorp. Under his leadership, the company had expanded into new markets, developed innovative products, and built a reputation for ethical business practices that attracted both top talent and premium clients. Emma entered the office carrying 2 coffee cups, a reversal of the morning ritual David had once shared with Sarah, but this time built on genuine partnership rather than hidden resentment. "Penny for your thoughts?" Emma asked, handing him a cup of his favorite dark roast. "Just reflecting on how much has changed," David replied, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. 2 years ago, I thought my world was ending. I was facing divorce, professional humiliation, and the potential destruction of everything I'd built. But it turned out to be the beginning of something better." "That's because you handled it with integrity," Emma said. "You could have been vindictive or cruel, but instead you focused on protecting what mattered: the company, the employees, the principles you believed in. That's real strength." David thought about the secret trust fund structure he had established 3 years ago, the hidden protection that had seemed like paranoid over-planning at the time, but had ultimately saved everything. His father's childhood lesson about protecting valuable assets from unpredictable human behavior had proven prophetic. "The funny thing is," David mused, "I never wanted to use those protections. When I set up that trust fund with Mr. Cross, I honestly hoped it would just sit there forever, never needed. I trusted Sarah completely back then. But sometimes you have to protect against possibilities you hope never materialize. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't established that structure?" Emma asked. "All the time," David admitted. "Sarah would have sold Bright Tech to Megacorp. Hundreds of employees would have lost their jobs when they eliminated redundancies. All our innovative projects would have been cancelled or absorbed into their corporate bureaucracy. And Sarah would have walked away with millions while destroying everything we'd built together. The trust fund didn't just protect me, it protected everyone." As the sun dipped below the horizon and Seattle's city lights began twinkling like stars, David felt a profound sense of gratitude. Yes, Sarah's betrayal had been painful. Yes, the divorce had been difficult. But those challenges had taught him invaluable lessons about trust, protection, and the difference between love and control. True power, he had learned, didn't come from titles or authority or manipulation. It came from wisdom, patience, integrity, and the courage to protect what truly mattered, even when doing so required uncomfortable preparations and difficult decisions. His phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Cross. "Congratulations on the Thompson Industries contract. Well done. I always knew you had the strategic mind to build something lasting. Dinner next week to celebrate?" David smiled and typed back. Absolutely. Thank you for everything, Mr. Cross. That trust fund structure saved more than just my company, it saved my future. As he and Emma left the office together, walking hand in hand toward the parking garage, David reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Sarah had viewed their marriage and their business as a zero-sum game, a competition where someone had to win and someone had to lose. But real success, David now understood, wasn't about defeating others. It was about building something meaningful, protecting it wisely, and sharing it with people who truly valued partnership over power. The end. Final reflection. David's story teaches us several important lessons that even a 9-year-old can understand. 1. Protect what you build. Just like you might save your allowance in a piggy bank, sometimes in business you need to create protections for the valuable things you create, just in case something goes wrong in the future. 2. Actions have consequences. Sarah thought she could betray her partner without facing any repercussions. But her choices had serious consequences that affected not just her marriage, but her career, her reputation, and her future. 3. True partnership versus power games. Real relationships, whether in marriage or business, are built on trust, respect, and genuine care for each other. When someone views relationships as competitions to win, everyone loses in the end. 4. Patience and strategy win. David didn't react emotionally or impulsively when Sarah betrayed him. Instead, he stayed calm, gathered evidence, consulted experts, and executed a carefully planned strategy. His patience and preparation made all the difference. 5. Integrity matters. Throughout his ordeal, David focused on protecting the company, the employees, and the principles he believed in, not just on revenge. That integrity is what allowed him to rebuild successfully and find genuine happiness. What would you have done if you discovered your partner's betrayal while holding the power to protect what you'd built together? Would you have prepared protections in advance, or would you have trusted completely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others discover it too. Thank you for reading, and remember, the best protection against betrayal is wisdom, preparation, and the courage to value yourself enough to safeguard your future.